Hi, I'm Alyssa Fragnoli, and my area of focus is human resources and employment law. Today, the topic of communication that I'd like to discuss with you that I think is of vital importance to this field and in maintaining a positive work environment is conflict management. Because let's face it, conflict is inevitable. So today, I'm going to discuss the 5 different major styles of conflict management, as well as discuss the influence of culture in how we manage conflict. The first style I'd like to go over is competing style, which is defined by our textbook as a style of conflict management that indicates a high concern for self and a low concern for other. When we compete, we essentially strive to win the conflict, often at the expense of the other party. It's important to keep in mind that this style of conflicts competing is very different than trying to compete in a sport or a game with much very different consequences. Now, there's 2 different styles of competing. We have non-coercive, which often involves persuading or requesting, and then we have coercive, which often includes violations of ethical standards of communication. It includes things like yelling, profanity, threats, insults, and as such is often a very ineffective way to manage conflict. It can lead to damaged relationships and reduced collaboration. The next style I'd like to go over is avoiding. This style of conflict management, as defined by our textbook, often indicates a low concern for self and a low concern for other. Essentially, there's little to no direct communication about the conflict. We, as the name suggests, avoid it. Now, this can often result in a lose-lose situation because it's often indirect and passive. Now, I know it's easy to think, sometimes it's easy to avoid the conflict to keep the peace, to keep the harmony, or it's easier to just deal with the conflict. But remember, even if we're not saying anything, that's still a form of nonverbal communication and can be seen as passive-aggressive and result in passive-aggressive behaviors from the other party towards you. It can be a useful approach if maybe you need more time to discover information about the conflict or try to come up with different ways to resolve it. But it's typically not viewed as an effective long-term strategy. Next, we have accommodating, which is also can be called yielding. Now, this style of conflict management indicates a low concern for self and a high concern for other. It's often viewed as passive or submissive, and essentially we're just complying or obliging with the other party at the expense of expressing our own needs or our own goals or desires. This style can be used as a way to try to be generous, and can be effective if maybe there's little to no chance that your goals are ever going to be achieved, or maybe the relationship just means too much to you. However, it can be a slippery slope because it can lead to others taking advantage of you, and you don't ever want to be seen as a pushover. Then we have compromising. This style of conflict management is a give and take approach that shows a moderate concern for self and other. We compromise to try to seek to find a middle ground in the conflict. Now, in doing this, we tend to give up either part or most of what we want. It can be kind of viewed as a temporary bandage, so to speak, because it can be used as an easy way out. And then oftentimes we don't actually address the underlying issues. And sometimes when we compromise too much, it can lead to feelings of resentment later on down the road. It's important to remember that this style is most effective when both parties find an equitable and agreeable solution and there's an equal balance of power in the relationship. It works best in complex situations where there may not be a perfect solution or when there's a quick fix needed. Last but not least is my favorite and highly considered the most effective style of conflict management, and that is collaboration. This style of conflict management, there's a high degree concern for self and other, and usually indicates investment in the conflict situation and the relationship. Collaborating can take more work, but often leads to win-win results because it involves both parties standing up for their needs, their wants, their goals, while simultaneously trying to understand the other parties, their needs, their wants, and respect their needs and where they're coming from. It involves diving deeper into the conflict and addressing the underlying issues at their core. This often leads to more creative problem solving. When managing a conflict using collaboration, an article published by the HR department at Carnegie Mellon University reminds us to use active listening, manage emotion, agree on goals, focus on issues and facts rather than personalities, engage in problem solving and exploring alternative solutions, and reach an agreement on next steps. Now, it's also very important to remember the influence of culture and how conflict is managed. How we deal with conflict has a lot to do with where we come from in our background. As the book points out, these conflict management styles are constructed through a Western lens. The US, as well as many countries in Europe, are individualistic cultures who emphasize individual identity over group identity and often encourages competition. While there's a lot of other countries, particularly in Asia and South America, that are more collective cultures. They value in-group identity over individual identity and conformity to norms. Collective cultures tend to steer away from confrontation and may prefer strategies like avoiding or accommodating because they prioritize that group harmony. Different cultures also view conflict differently, and cultural misunderstanding can lead to conflicts escalating further. So it's important to be aware of cultural differences and how this affects individuals' preferred conflict management styles. When dealing with cultural conflicts, an article published on LinkedIn reminds us to recognize our biases, learn about other cultures, adapt your communication style, manage your emotions, collaborate on solutions, and of course, celebrate diversity. Using conflict management strategies effectively allows for open communication where employees feel comfortable. Keep in mind the 5 different strategies we reviewed can be applicable depending on the situation, but oftentimes collaboration is the most effective. It's vital to keep in mind that how underlying differences affect how we may perceive and handle the conflict. When strategies and cultural fluency are effective, it can lead to enhanced employee relationship based on mutual respect and understanding and an overall more positive work environment. Thank you for your time and good luck on finals, everybody.